We're breaking down the SEC team by team here from SEC Media Days in Hoover, Alabama. Joined by Phil Savage, the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl. On Tuesday, Phil, 4 more teams were in the house. South Carolina and Steve Spurrier, who's always a good soundbite, talking about his quarterbacks. Of course, no more Connor Shaw. Dylan Thompson steps in.
Yeah, Connor Shaw, 17-0 at home in Williams-Brice Stadium. And so now Dylan Thompson comes in. Now he's 3-0 as a starter. Yeah. But I think the key for South Carolina is going to be the play of their offensive line, one of the more experienced groups in the entire conference. And then defensively, J.T. Surratt and others on the defensive side of the ball trying to elevate their game to replace Jadeveon Clowney.
It seems like this time of year, you always hear that this is the year Mississippi State breaks through. Dan Mullen's hearing it again. They do have a lot of talent. Is this the year they kind of are a player in the West?
Well, we're going to know a lot more about Mississippi State within the first half of the season because they go to LSU, Texas A&M, and Auburn are on the front half of the schedule. But they do have 2 key figures to build around. Offensively, Dak Prescott, who I saw down at the Manning Academy over the weekend. Big arm, good athlete. He's the full-fledged starter. He's the guy offensively. And then on defense, they have one of the best players in the conference that no one's ever heard of, Benardrick McKinney, the inside linebacker. He's an outstanding talent, a guy that really dictates the tempo of this Mississippi State defense that incidentally quietly flew under the radar last year. They do some of the best work in terms of their schemes. Jeff Collins, the defensive coordinator, very underrated across the conference.
One of the best questions of the week, a reporter asked Kevin Sumlin, what's it like not to coach Johnny Manziel? And he just shook his head. It's like, really? I mean, come on, man. But his quarterback situation is somewhat unsettled, although he's got a lot of talented guys. Defense is something they're going to have to turn around this year.
Yeah, I think with A&M, there's 2 prevailing questions. Who replaces Johnny Manziel, and can this defense be repaired? Because last year the coaches exhorted the Aggies to stop somebody, anybody, and it never happened. And so they had a very young team. They're looking for more leadership on that side of the ball. But you would suspect that to survive the battles of the SEC West and thrive in those battles, they need better play from the defensive side of the ball while they break in a new quarterback.
Or you could just change your media guide like this year's media guide has them beating Alabama 72-49 instead of losing 49-42. A little typo, but that's one way to improve the record, I guess. Tennessee Volunteers, Butch Jones in his second year. I mean, he's got the inevitable task of trying to replace his offensive line, the entire offensive line, and then the entire defensive line, the only FBS school that has that problem.
That's the negative. The upside, though, is that Butch Jones has put out a message that people are really buying into. And I think that, last year they had all of their lines back and no skill players. This year they have skill players and no line. And I think once they get their recruiting figured out and balanced up, if they can just survive this year and get to 6-6, get to a bowl, get those extra practices in December, then they're going to be on their way in terms of reasserting themselves as a legitimate team in the SEC East. But they've got to be able to have some production this year and survive to get to 2015, where I think some of their recruiting classes will really begin to pull together and make them a better team.
That's a look at 4 more schools as we are halfway through the 4-day SEC Media Days.